Hey, welcome back. In this lesson, we're going to be inking over the pencil gestures we did last time. So I'm going to cover 3 points: drawing with an open line, how to paint with the pen, and thinking about shadow shapes. So what do I mean by those? So the open line is, well, it's like it sounds. The idea to as you move, I want a loose gestural line to keep the liveliness that you have in your original sketch, to keep it open, to let there to be breaks where light might cross the form. So it's not a sealed, enclosed outline. What I'm trying to avoid is a cartoony look. I want this sketch to have a painterly feel, which is why I say it's painting with the pen. I'm going to be doing lots of little shapes, little squiggles and loops and moving gestures with the pen. I like to think of it like the brush touching the page. I'll be like making little outlines, and I'll point out as I'm going that are the kind of things I would do if I was doing it with a brush. Because when you're painting, it's a structural, 3-dimensional kind of thinking. I want to avoid a diagrammatical kind of line drawing. It's not drafting, it's art. So yeah, and then thinking about shadow shapes, that'll be easier to see than describe, but what I'm actually doing is outlining areas of color, drawing the shape of the shadow that's cast by the light. So later on, when I get to the color, I have clues built into the drawing. Because each step, just like we did with the gesture, if we lost our subject, we had the anchor points that'll help us finish the drawing. And here in the ink line, if we lose our subject, we have the shadow shapes that tell us where to put the color. So each step builds on the one that went before and helps you with the next. Okay, so a bit about tools before we start. I'm going to be drawing with a couple pens today. I have a Lamy Safari. This is my basic pen I use for almost everything. What I love about the fountain pen is the ability to alter your line weight as you're drawing. You can get a little bit of thick and thin just by tilting the pen, or the angle of attack, really, or whether you draw with the front or the back will change your line weight. So you'll see that as I work. But I also have another pen for detail, which I like, the Platinum Carbon. Platinum Carbon's brand pen. This is the ink that I'm using as well, Platinum Carbon ink. I'll get to that. So this is a finer pen, which I use for small details, like in the face. You'll see as I switch it up. So because we're going to ink for watercolor, we'll be washing color over this. I definitely recommend starting with waterproof ink. So the Platinum Carbon brand ink cartridges that work in these pens, super convenient. The little cartridge is just a disposable guy. I carry a bunch of them around with me, so I always have a lot of ink, and it's really easy to swap out in the field. But in the Lamy pen, they don't use that brand cartridge, so I have another gadget, which is this ink converter. It's a little suction device that you use a bottle of ink to refill. So if you get Platinum Carbon in the bottle, it looks like that. And there's one of those ink converters, and it just has a little hypodermic action. So those are all the tools I need to get my fountain pen full of the inks that I like and the 2 different line weights. So we'll go ahead with these. So we'll get started with the actual drawing. You remember this sketch from the first stage where we got our girl drinking coffee. So it's very loose. This is my framework. Everything I need to know is in here, those anchor points. Okay, so this sketch is very casual. It almost might have seemed like I wasn't even trying, just rolling the pen, moving things along, because I'm just trying to get this overall big shape captured. Because I'm expecting her to leave. I'm expecting her boyfriend to show up and sit right in front of me. I'm expecting something to happen, so I can't finish the drawing. But I'm lucky, because it's recorded, I still have a view. So what I would be doing in the wild is just switching to my pen and continuing to draw right away. But I always have this very casual, low investment approach to these gestures, because I'll do as many as it takes to get the gesture I want. I might have drawn her 4 or 5 times to get the pose. So I have this very classic, she's drinking the coffee. If this was a high motion situation, like, I don't know, you're drawing sports or some activity where people are really moving around, it may take more than one gesture to get what you want. So that's why we're very relaxed about this drawing. But now we're gonna go in and observe more carefully and try to do the finish line. So I will get started. Enough delay, let's draw. So you're really starting in the same kind of process of keeping the pen moving, and you're looking for the shapes that you've given yourself, following those guides. She's very slender, but she has these wrinkles on the t-shirt here. And they were in there in the drawing in a little way. But here's a shadow shape. That bit where her sleeve casts a shadow on her arm. And there's some small ones on the inside. This whole thing here is kind of a shape of shadow. So that's one of those terms I was talking about before. And as I'm doing this, I'm looking to build up these shadows. Those are those clues where the paint goes later. There's another one. I'm always looking for where those little darks. There's another one there under the sleeve. So let's just draw a bit more, get a few more shapes in. So there's the hand goes, that's where the wrist was, that's where the elbow was. So I always like to get these anchors in kind of one go. And then I'm just drawing the outline shape of the hand. We're going to talk about hands in a later exercise, but that's the basic idea right there. What I call the mitten, the outline shape of the hand, and then I'll come back later for what? Little shadow shapes. There's little cast shapes inside the fingers that break up that mitten and turn it into an actual hand. So I'm going to switch down a pen to go into the face and talk a bit more about this idea of painting with the pen. So you're looking into where there are cast shadows. Under her nose, in a normal situation, the sun is up there in the sky. We'll call top lighting. That's your normal situation, is that the light is coming from above. So the under the nose and the upper lip are always in shadow, and below the lip, those are typical lighting situations. So to some extent, that's always there. So I know what I'm looking for. But I try to observe the actual circumstance in front of me, of course. And here's an example. Here's a great example. What I always like to say, you're not really drawing an eye, you're drawing the shadow of the eye socket. So there's a little bit of, she has a slight fold under the eye there, and there's actually a little bit of a cheekbone going on. So I'm looking for what would be brush strokes, and I just did a little loop there. Remember I said squiggles and loops and squiggles? I'm almost outlining to myself where are little dabs of the brush. If I was an impressionist painter, I would let the brush fall and make a single stroke. So I'm thinking about that in my pen and ink. There's a big shadow shape on the neck here. This is a nice one. So it makes a cast shadow that's under her chin, but it connects with what's going on the clavicle. So you can make as many scribbles as you want inside a shadow. You want to stay away from the lights. Whatever's light is not going to get the black ink, but inside the shadows, actually if you put some little gestural marks in there, that's okay. You can be messy inside those shadow areas because you're going to be reinforcing them with darks later on. So, and I'll switch back and forth between the line weights. It gets to be instinctual after a while, what pen you want to use when. When I'm drawing hair, I'm thinking there's a little cast shadow in the hair, which is the part of the hair, and then again on the bangs. I'm doing that thing, outlining for myself where is those shapes that make the hair. I'm not drawing the hair, I'm drawing the shadows, the hair casts. I might get back in and reinforce some of those heavier lines. And here's the ear to jaw line. It's very important to me. That's an anchor point I always like to have. Tells me where she's looking, gives me the attitude of her head. And then there's a little bit of a hair in the back there. Just a single shape. So she's starting to come together. So remember I was talking about outside in, the larger to smaller, when we were talking about the gesture. It's really the same in the pen drawing. You're trying to get those big shapes and then get in and refine those shapes. So in her body, there are some smaller details, like this little collar that comes around has a bit of there's a seam here around the collar of the shirt. So I might indicate that with a few marks. But that's drawing with an open line. I didn't seal that shape up, make a big diagram. I made some hints. I start the line and then let it break. So yeah, same here at the point of the shoulder. I wouldn't need to join every little piece up. I'm going to leave those little open bits. Let's put this. So I'm waiting for her as she's drinking and she comes back with the coffee cup. And these fingers are just a series of little shadows. I don't even really see the fingers. I just see where they touch the mug. The handle of the mug is out there. There's another. I'm going to at some point talk about contact shadows when we get to the inking later. But those points where things touch are things I want to remember. There's the shape of the mug. And so I know where her elbow is. If she was completely gone, here's this thing about these anchor points. There's a way to cheat. You can look at other people there's other people drinking coffee and they're basically doing the same gesture. So I could have drawn that hand from a totally different person, but it would have been mapped onto the gesture I'd given myself. So you can, by giving you these clues, you're adapting to circumstances. Whatever happens, whatever real life throws your way. And again, when you're drawing people who are doing something much more active, it's more likely you're going to have these interruptions. That's why I like people to start in a coffee shop, because it's kind of the easy case. You're giving yourself a chance to get a few that succeed before you go out and draw circus performers. So, okay, let's just finish it up. Did I mention that part of the beauty of sketching is it's great for people with a short attention span that just want to see some results very quickly? So I'm already getting to the point where I'm like, why am I not done drawing the next one? Just a little indication of the environment. I like to have some clues of where we are, but not get too deeply invested in that. So the fact that there's a coffee cup and a table, and there'd be a whole sketchbook full of drawings. So I'd see the environment develop. That's enough for me now that there's a table. And let's see. The planes of the face, this idea of shadow shapes, there's a cheekbone here, and the side angle of the face kind of runs there. So I made a little open line, and there's a little bit of an accent there on the nose. That flange on the nose. I'm going to think about these large shapes as well. That divides the two planes of the head and that shape of the neck. Those are good key shadow shapes. There's sort of a cast shadow inside the arm here. And you know, these are the big ones on her. So I'll make these, oops, well, that's nice. That was a nice little glitch. I actually like those. They add some spontaneity to the drawing. Again, here I am, little painterly brush strokes, getting the wrinkles, the compression wrinkles on her shirt. And I was going to talk about crossing form, that big loop I made. Just crossing the form, not worrying about, you don't want it to feel like a draftsman-like drawing. You don't want it to be thinking architecturally. You want to be thinking painterly. So I think that is coming to a close for this drawing, yeah. That's pretty much captured. I could do more, but I want to be able to do it when I get to the brush stage, the next stage. So I did say earlier, it should never feel like tracing. You always want, each stage of the drawing has to be entertaining to you. You want to be seeing new things develop and having fun with the drawing. So I haven't overworked my gesture to the point that the ink drawing is robotic. And I don't do so much in the ink that I'm starting to shade in what I'll do later with the brush. I just as little as you need to get to the next step, because that keeps it fast, which will be very handy when you're drawing tennis players or something in motion. So, okay, I think that's good for her. Okay, so let's do another one, second example. We're going to do 3 here. This second example is another coffee drinker. And I want you to start with things like this. The coffee shop, drawing in the subway is something I like to do, going to the bookstore. Those things that I called captive subjects in the homework. Give yourself a chance to start with the easy ones before you get out into the real full motion. So another coffee drinker. Now we've got an interesting pose here, so I'm going to start with those hands. That was the thing that made this gesture different for me than the other one. So I'm starting with a small pen here because the hands are first. So again, it's that thing of getting that outline shape first, the larger to smaller, what I've been talking about. Thinking about the shadow shape that's in there and not being too worried about precision, because it's a process of refinement as I move along. If I get that mitten right, then I can just draw over. She has a little pinky sticking out, and it's those, there's a big ring here. That's kind of neat. It's ring shape. So it doesn't even look like anything yet. It's just letting those marks accumulate on top of each other, those little painterly marks, and thinking about those shadow shapes. Like there's a whole shadow on the back of the palm of her hand, the back side of the hand. But I want to get to break that form up into those elements that describe it as I'm working on assembling the character of this second pose. And again, if you lose your subject, you can look for other people that are doing similar things. Sometimes I follow my subject around. They'll, like if it's a person walking down the street, I might follow behind and see where they go, and if they stop and get back on their phone and restart their conversation. Or I've been known to race ahead of someone I want to draw, get a block ahead, and then casually lean against a lamppost and hope they'll come back and cross my path. So That's that very, very basic scribble that we're going to refine later with cast shadows. I'm already thinking about little cast shapes of where her finger is touching the cup. And there's that little, the thing about these kind of drawings, if you wanted a perfect rendition, you could be a photographer, or you would be a studio painter. You get your oil paints out and make a perfect representation. So when you're a sketcher, what you're looking for is the essence. So I'm not too concerned as long as I have a sense of flow. See, that was a big line just went, but that little line that went where I didn't want it, I just keep working with it. Just draw on top. I want to see, there's this thing where her leg crosses. So sometimes you're stopping to observe and see what kind of mark will bring that shape to life. Her hip is there, so there's some weight. That's a shadow shape on the side of her leg, and she just put her coffee cup in front of this for me, but I know that there's a cast shadow there where her knee comes out. So all that stuff is in there. All those little anchor points are in my drawing, but I'm still taking the opportunity to look and observe from nature to get a little bit more information while I can. Always draw from the actual material while it's in front of you. Never stop drawing while your subject's there. Take advantage, getting every piece of real information that you can. So she's starting to appear outside in larger forms, but I'm thinking about how the shapes inside kind of cross the form. I'm going to be coming back and re-emphasizing these things later, but there are little wrinkles. This black dress is going to be a subject that we'll talk about definitely later. When we come to the inking, this is a big silhouette shape. She has this large, it's very graphic, very bold, eye-catching form. That's why she's wearing it. Looks great. So we're going to have to deal with how we do all that blackness. So I'm still thinking about, there are shapes inside here. There's compression wrinkles on the clothing. I'm thinking right now about clues I'm going to need later. There's that ear to jaw line, which is very important for me for getting the shape of her head and where she's looking. But here's a chance to do some brush painting. There's all these little marks. There's a featheriness to this hair. You can imagine if you were an oil painter, you might get in there and just flick a little brush stroke in. See how it's open? I didn't seal up the shape of her hair, because hair is a form that's generally always moving in the breeze. You want to make it look organic. You want to make it look like there's a few stray kind of hairs. So you definitely don't want it to be sealed. You want that sense of open line on this kind of thing. But I'm defining the shadow side of the head there, and that there's a little bit of a part going on. So I'm placing those strokes in ways that reinforce what I'm looking for. Yeah. All right, so what else? This is obviously a university coffee shop. Everyone is there with their textbooks. So which very simple props you put in, even if they're just a afterthought, the small props you put in tell a little bit about the story of the location. So it's a good habit to get into. You're always looking for what is just a little detail I can include so that afterwards I remember where I was, why did I do that drawing, what attracted me to this scene. It's that storytelling. Okay, so I'll have to concentrate a bit as we get into the face. So again, I'm thinking about those shadow shapes. Where are the little cast shadows in the face? You don't draw the oval of the eye or the cupid bow lip. It's almost like there's nothing there but light and shade, and you're gonna just observe what you see and make abstract forms. I get the sense that she's got that smile going on, and you get the little cast shadow under where the cheek forms at the corner of the mouth. It says that the mouth is turned up. There's a little notation. There's a little shadow shape there, and there's cast shadow on the lower side of the face. Those planes, there's these little diamond-like planes that make her chin. So that was a very subtle little outline. That's the kind of thing I'm looking for. And then, so we have the nose. Shape of the eye in here. And I'm not trying to get every piece of detail now, because I'm going to come back and refine it later. each step of the drawing builds to the next. But again, as I did last time, I'm thinking, what are the two sides? There's the front of the face and the side plane of the head. So there is a shadow line that comes right down the side of that head there. That's the kind of thing I'll use later in the color. A little messy there, but. Okay, so it's starting to come together. This is a very loose one, very open one, because there's going to be a lot of work in this dress, making this solid black form. So maybe it's not as tight as the last drawing, because I'm thinking already that I'm going to be doing a lot of brushwork in here. There's a couple ways you could solve this dress. You could say, well, I'm not even going to worry about it now. I'll do it when I get to the color and just fill it with watercolor. That's definitely an option. You could try to do it with hatching and build it up with halftones, but it is solid black. So I think the only solution is going to be a lot of brushwork in here. So that'll be exciting. We'll see that next time. Okay, I'm going to call this one done, and we'll get to our next example. Okay, for the third example, I'm going to change it up a bit. I'm going to use the dipping pens. So I have a little jar of ink here. Just want to show you how these work. These little jars, they clip right onto your sketchbook. So it's kind of handy if you're walking around on location. You can have that jar with you all the time. That's actually an oil painting tool for holding your medium while you're mixing your paints, but it works great for carrying ink. I'll put that aside. So I'm going to be using these kind of dipping pens. This gives you a more organic line. Even it's like the fountain pen, but even more flexible. So I thought I'd show you that. There is some more about these in the materials, types of nibs that I like. So you can download the info and check out which ones. This is the Zebra, the Japanese pen. It's a good general kind of purpose, multi-purpose pen. So what's going to be a little different with these is even a little more painterly. That idea that you're placing these marks. But I also got to stay disciplined, keep to my system. Get the mitten of the hand, the outside shape first. So as you can see with these dipping pens, they make a more thick to thin kind of line, but they also flow really nicely. You can get some very nice, loose, scribbly marks with them. So there is the compression wrinkles of his sleeves. I love drawing these things because they're just like a little noodle of scribble. That's where his forearm starts, and I'll just flow down to the hand. And I'm looking for that little tick on the wrist. That's that anchor of where his wrist turns, and that turns into the hand. One shape leads into another. And I think about the knock for his thumb. And there, right there is the mitten. That's the whole hand in the two shapes of where the fingers are and the back of the hand. And then when I go back in, just dip for some ink, when I go back in, for the little cast shadows inside the fingers, suddenly a hand appears. So it's outside in, larger, smaller. And we're going to be really doing that whole thing. It's the same strategy of that painterly approach, subdividing shapes. I like to call it subdividing shapes. So there's a bit of his hair, and then I liked this. He is moving his head around on me as he plays, but I like this head down, getting into the playing. So that cast shadow under his chin as it goes into the collar here. See how much looser this drawing is? I feel it is. With these nibs, I like these a lot. Again, that business of anchor points, this is the strap of the guitar. So it connects here, and it goes up to the shoulder. So I want to get some line weight variation, and I'm just thinking point to point, just like I do with things like shoulders down. Or let's go from the points of his hip to his knee down to where there's all this kind of wrinkles on the bottom of his pant legs. See how the pen kind of dies out on you as you move? That's part of the organic line you get out of this. So you're thinking, where's my start? And then there's 3 anchor points, hip, knee, ankle. And I just want to do that. Let me get some ink. There's a pocket of his pants, and I just want to get that to flow. Just down in one continuous line, and some of these internal shapes where his pants are. So as long as I have, here, I'm going to switch up to get a little bit of a bolder line. This is a nib, I love it. It's called the Blue Pumpkin. It has a little bit of a gunmetal blue finish. And it holds even more ink. So I can get a nice bold line out of it. Just got to load that up. So, okay, I was talking about the breaking up the shapes. This is his shirt shape. Whoa, that was close. Normally it's clipped on a sketchbook. See that shirt shape appear, subdividing what was his pants and what is his shirt? Because I'm thinking about later on, I'm going to need to be breaking up these color blocks. So I want this nice shadow to be in here. And then we're going to build the guitar out of these painterly shapes. I'm not going to try to, because this is a complex object, it has its own anatomy. I'm looking for these little clues. There I've outlined a little cast shadow underneath the neck of the guitar, and that horn that's on the other side of it. So the thing will appear if you move in an open line around the form, and that thing's just going to start to appear, the shape that there's a guitar there. I'm not going to get into drawing strings, fine details like that. That's the kind of thing I would leave out of a sketch. But I'll look for little clues that are useful to me. So there's these little tuning pins on the end. I don't play the instrument. That's the kind of little detail I like. Internal stuff like where are those strings, I wouldn't worry about that. But I'll go back for things like, what's here? This is the base where they attach. That's a little detail. Oh, and the chord is a nice organic shape. That's something that's great to get in. Okay, so we need to get a face in here. Okay, he's wearing glasses. That's great. So the trick to drawing glasses, just like the trick with the guitar, is not to draw the whole thing. I draw where they cross the outside of the form. There's the outside of the edge of the spectacle. And I'm thinking of the shadow shape where it touches the nose. But I don't want to overdraw them, or they'll look like they've been outlined like a little cartoon. And then you can always see someone's eyes through the glasses. So when I get the indication of the frame, that's where I'll stop. Because then I'm drawing the eye socket shape. A little bit of his lips, and thinking about the plane side of his head, like that underplane. There's some activity inside his ears. So this one is, I'm liking it. It's even more loose and gestural. It's certainly not a portrait of this fellow. We'll talk about portraits later. If you really care about getting the individual person that is recognizable as a person rather than just that you were looking at music, you're going to probably have to draw them more than once to get the hang of their face and to have it, to learn it a few times. So doing a couple of rapid sketches, you'll learn the guy's anatomy. And it's on the third or fourth time you draw them that you start to see the actual person. But for a sketch, I just want the impression. So that's the kind of line you'll get out of this pen. Quite different, I think, than the others. And I definitely have to let this kind of drawing dry. You can see there's puddles of ink all over it. So one of the reasons I like to draw on loose sheets of paper, as well as sketchbooks, is if this was in a sketchbook, you can't close your book until the drawing is dry. So remember that, or it'll print onto the other page. Yeah, that's pretty much, this is good. This is getting there. You notice I've also, one other thing, I have not drawn the checkered shirt. That is a pattern I would not try to get into. Artistic license. Yep, more wrinkles, little marks in the fabric, so I just said I wouldn't draw the pattern. These little ticks, to me, that's me drawing the checkered shirt. Just the fact that there's some texture there, and the rest of it will come in color. So, yeah. That's good. That is pretty much done. Okay, so 3 different sketches, trying to cover all those basics of working from the outside in and keeping that line open. And why I do this open line is because I'm thinking ahead to the color. The color that comes later is going to build on top of this form and solidify it. So I want the line to be open because the color will make big shapes. And what were the other points that we wanted to cover? I draw the painting with the pen, thinking of those little outline marks that are like pen strokes with your ink line, and the shadow shapes that I'm going to come back in later. Like this back leg is darker than the front. So actually, this is a thing where the forms merge. The 2 legs, these dark jeans, they weld right into each other. So I've made that into one big shadow shape. So those are those 3 points that I'm always thinking about when I'm drawing. Pay attention to those in your homework. What I would do with the homework is you've been doing pencil gestures, presumably your practice, so you can go and, as I've done, ink over top of your gestures. And I start with the ones I like the least. If I have a gesture I didn't like, then it's kind of fun to redraw it, and then I get to erase the bad drawing and have a nice one on top. So, and now is also time to start your scribblers. These little books that you can carry around with you everywhere and just do drawings of people that you might see in a cafe, or this was at a life drawing class, but we're waiting to get started. These are the things that let you draw every day, get the pen to be totally comfortable. Just, you know, the more you draw, the faster you will learn. So these scribblers are key to your homework process. Okay, so that's it for this. In the next lesson, we will finish these drawings with the brush. We'll get into the dark accents and do some hatching to transition from the darks and softer tones.